Hello, my dears. Daniela here, and welcome to the Spa Marketing Made Easy podcast. We are in the season of gratitude right now, and I just have to say that I am so incredibly grateful that my dear friend Selina Gray is joining us on the podcast. As I've grown as a CEO and really in my own journey of entrepreneurship, I have been so blessed to connect with some really incredible women, many of whom have become tried and true friends, and Selina is 100% in that circle. So when I first met her, she was very focused in the world of women and money, and yes, she still holds quite a bit of space there, but she's evolved not only in her business, stepping into this richness revolution, but also in her own journey of personal development and growth as a human being. It was really important for me to bring her on because one of the top struggles that I see in our industry is around money and worth. So we start off with a pretty high-level conversation, but we absolutely break it down towards the end of the interview. So if you're not already following Selina, please go and do that now. She is a woman of power. She is a woman of grace, and I am so honored to call her a friend. Now, let me do a quick read of her bio, and then we'll jump right into that interview. So as a CPA, I was a firm believer in the hustle. I worked 100 plus hour weeks across 12 countries, leading a global team of 30 for almost a decade. My life was consumed with achieving, competing, and managing $100 million budgets until I ended up with a lengthy hospital stay and an autoimmune diagnosis. It was my wake-up call to embody new forms of richness. Since 2012, as a founder and CEO of Richness Revolution, I have dedicated my life to empowering CEOs to lead themselves with unwavering, energetic intelligence, emotional richness, and financial power to break through the ceilings in their businesses and earnings, as well as create massive ripple effects in their lives and their communities. So obviously, great bio there. You guys are going to love Selina. I hope you love her as much as I do. Let's go ahead and play that interview. All right, Selina, welcome to the Spa Marketing Made Easy podcast. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. So excited for you to be here. Thank you so much.
I'm so honored to be here. I appreciate you more than words could possibly say.
Oh, so I invited you in to our Growth Factor group to have a conversation. You are, I did a brief, intro of who you are earlier in the podcast, but you are really a money expert, so much more than that. But when someone first finds you, Selina G Money, right? That's right. What it is. And there's so much power. I wanted to bring you in to talk to our Growth Factor clients because we as women especially, I think there's a lot of story, a lot of trauma, a lot of stuff, baggage, heaviness around money and around worthiness and having money, earning money, all of those types of things. And in spa, so many of the estheticians, of the providers, we are caregivers, we're nurturers, and I feel like it's almost compounded in that. And so I wanted to bring you in for our Growth Factor students to really kind of help guide them and open their mind and get them to see in a different perspective. We had incredible feedback. Like I had so many messages of like, she's amazing. She's like, did you see me when she said that? Da, da, da. It was just like so much excitement. So I was like, all right, got to have you on the podcast. And I'm really excited because you are in this transitional moment in your life as well, where, I'll invite you to talk about that because you've been so focused on money and that relationship. And now you've really pivoted into this richness revolution. And why don't you explain what that means?
Amazing. So yeah, I think it's just speaking to our growth over a lifetime, like who we evolve into both as a woman, as a CEO, and what we want in our life. And so how I began in the world of money, if I go way, way back, I was always fascinated by money as a child. I grew up in a very small town and I was always, really interested in the subject of money. I would speak about it and my mom would shush me, we don't speak about money. And I would find random things around the house and I would sell them to the neighbors on my street until they started hiding from me. I was like, oh, okay, time to change it up. And I just continuously wanted to learn and ask more questions. And I started realizing that money really represented freedom. If I had my own money, I didn't have to ask for permission to do things. And I think that that's become a fiber of my being in my entire life is leveraging money in its highest and best for me to live the life I desire. And so when I finished university, I became a controller. I got my CPA designation, professional bean counter, if you will, and immediately hopped on a plane and flew to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And I remember the bulls were running across the street as I was sitting in the boardroom and thinking, wow, this is amazing. This is combining travel, my love, and money, my love, and culture. And I was just like, wow, this is everything. And so I really started focusing in on wealth for myself. And what happened was it really elevated my focus.
What did wealth mean to you at that time in your life? Was it purely money?
So that's where I was headed, is like wealth was just a number on a piece of paper. I was like, when I reach the age of 30, I can retire, because I was living completely unconscious to my value being outside of myself. I got my designation. I got really good grades in university. I achieved, and I enjoyed the praise that came with it. And I also enjoyed the attention that money came in my life. And I really enjoyed what it brought me. And so I had decided through this career path that, wow, I'm going to travel the globe, assume this large amount of wealth, but the undercurrents were happening. My body started rebelling. The 100-hour work weeks were catching up with me. I was sleeping in my office on my couch and ignoring all of the physical symptoms in my body. And so there was a rebellion that happened. And I ended up, after 8 years of continuously striving to hustle for my worth, ended up in the hospital for 20 plus days. And that whole concept of wealth was outside myself at this point. And through that process, I started going, where did I go wrong? Because the doctor, when I left the hospital after the lengthy hospital stay, said, Selina, look, you are destined to have a chronic illness and your path, it has to change. And I really went through a dark phase and said, where did I go wrong here? Like, I was so close to my wealth target. What happened? And I started diving into the world of conscious wealth and realizing there was so much more to the story than numbers, that I was striving for a number on paper, but I was literally killing my body in the process. I was losing relationships all around me. I was missing out on friendships. I was prioritizing work, prioritizing doing presentations for my board of directors, prioritizing my $100+ million budgets over relationships. And that felt out of integrity for me, but I had a destination to arrive to, which was wealth. And then I could be happy. And so if you're listening to this, relating to that destination, I honor you, because that's what we've been taught in society. Wealth equals power, money equals freedom. But I started digging into the depths of that. And so my own revolutionary moments, began in that process where I started building this company out of my own pain, the pain of what I had gone through, how my worthiness was really connected to things outside of myself instead of learning my power and running with it. And so I started healing my relationship with money. And that's been the focus of the last 9 years of my company, is helping people stand in their worth and see the stories that exist in their lives that connect to money, that really take them out of true wealth, which is richness from the inside out. And so over the last couple of years, I've been, so honored to work with thousands of women on this topic and see all different resonance with worth and money and success in companies and what richness feels like in and out of businesses and in life. And I started realizing that there was a fire within me that couldn't be put out, which was it was time to let go of the pain and burn it down and really turn that into power and say, there's revolutionary moments for us all in our life that we meet the truest version of ourselves in that power. And it's our choice if we choose to see it or not. And that could be traumatic events or really celebratory moments, but we can be so focused on a destination that we forget to enjoy the journey. And that's really, for me, what Richness Revolution is it's embodying a state of richness, being in a state of richness as you go after those big goals instead of waiting for the goal to happen and then be happy. So it's really going deeper for me. The work for me around money is always there. It's my true love. It's my life mission. But Richness Revolution is revolutionary moments for us all and what that means to richness from within.
I can relate to that on so many levels because I know I am pretty sure that I told you this, but I lost my dad at 17. And my dad was a very successful businessman, made lots of money. And my entire 20s, I was like focused on my title and my salary. And I felt like that was directly correlated to my worth as a human being. So not only was I a woman that needed to prove myself, but I was a woman that needed to make a certain amount of money because when my dad was this age, this is how much money he was making. And so there was this kind of twofold. And I at this point in my life, I'm 40 years old now, right? I think age also gives us wisdom and experience. But what you're saying now, I'm not sure I could have understood it in my 20s when I was in that space of just like, well, yeah, you can say that because you've already earned 6 figures or 7 figures or whatever it is. It was so much about like, yeah, when you have it, you can then go deep internal. But if you don't have it, then you've got to hustle and do all these things to be able to prove that you actually are worthy of success, love, power, importance, like all these different things.
And I would ask, worthy to whom? People who is the question. And so, yes, as we are, evolving into adulthood and spreading our wings and getting really connected to who we are and what we want to achieve, there's something that happens to us is we can become unconscious or conscious to the programming that exists within us. And so there's something you said about your dad saying at a certain level he earned at this target of age, it becomes like an inherent goal that we want to live within the money rules of our family. Mm-hmm. And we really don't logically always think about it. It's just something embedded within us. And that's something that I believe we can learn at any age, is that how we grew up is really unique. How we look at our different relations to wealth and money is based and shaped on our experiences and interactions with money and how the people of influence in our life really taught us what money looks like. And so to me, this is a legacy conversation. It's awakening at any age to what money really means to you and that it doesn't have to be outside of yourself. Targets we're achieving. It's like, do I really want to strive for that? Because I'm looking for approval that lives outside myself. And do I actually desire that? Why am I incessantly trying to prove something? Where does that come from? Mm-hmm. And often it's validation. And so that can be found at any age.
Validation, ego, I think also gets in there, especially if you're a competitive person, which so many business owners and
we
CEOs
certainly are.
But it's, I have some women in the group and they're like, I just want to hit 7 figures. And I'm like, awesome. I think that's an incredible goal. Why?
Yes, that's the question.
Right? Is it because your lifestyle is going to drastically change? Is it the amount that you're paying yourself, the time off that you're giving? What does that mean for you? And if you hit 900,000 versus 1 million, are you going to be upset? Like, is your life going to change that much? After a certain point, it really doesn't.
What have we attached to the $1 million meaning at that point, or any target for that matter, to say like, when I reach a destination, then I can. But often us competitive overachievers are already on to the next destination, 2 million or whatever the next target is. And we seldom take a moment to pause and celebrate. And so, yes, why? But also, like, there's no shame in whatever the reasoning is if it's neutral. Like, if I desire to have $1 million business because I just desire it, amazing. But if we start asking those questions to say why, and it's like, well, because I want to do it because, underlying reasons of well, I need to be successful in order to reach $1 million. Well, what's the level of success? And then you start learning the programming that we have behind the scenes.
And to be clear, and I am sure that you agree with me, Selina, there is nothing wrong with desiring $100,000 business, and there's nothing wrong with desiring $100 million business. The question is always going to be the same. Why, right? What does that mean for you? What is that? Just really being able to go inward and say, what do I want my life to look like? Do I want to take and pick up my kids from school every single day? Do I want to, just do this thing because I love it? Do I want to make a dramatic impact on the world and start this foundation or whatever, whatever you want, what you desire, that's right. That's true. That's okay.
1,000%. Richness is an individual conversation based on what we deeply value in our life. And we seldom pause to think about that. Like, why am I striving so hard for this? I was striving to retire at 30. How did I even come up with that? I just knew my body was starting to rebel. And I was like, at this point, then I can reach a target and be free. And so if that's having any resonance for you as you're listening to this, it's just, there is no benchmark that is out of integrity if you desire it. It can be a really small number or a high number. It feels good to you. That is richness. Richness is a state of being.
So before we hit record, we were talking a little bit, and you said, I realized once I had hit these numbers on paper, I felt completely empty. And that was something that really helped you to pivot into searching, like, well, what fulfills me? What is my why? What is all of that? So can we go a little bit deeper in that? And because I think that connects with, you had set this goal, you didn't have a clear understanding of why that was. And that's likely what made you feel empty, what made you feel. So as a business owner, as a CEO, someone, most of our spa owners are hiring and leading and having teams of people. How do you understand how to set those goals and understand what the why is for you in a business?
So when I think back to those targets, it was based on external factors. It seemed to be a beautiful goal for someone else that I had adopted for me. And through this process of healing, I've started realizing that it's in the smallest of moments that we can find peace and happiness and joy when we're not paying attention so fully to what's happening around us. And so for me, I really wanted to get back to basics to say, if no one's watching me and I'm not competing with anyone, and I can choose to do something that really lights me up, that I'm really excited about every single day, what does that look like? And then I found my logical brain going, well, that's not possible. And so then again, asking better questions to say, well, why do I feel that way? And why does it feel unattainable? And then just starting to carve down into what that looks like. And you said something at the beginning of this interview that really stuck with me. You said, as women, especially in spa, there's this idea of being nurturers and service providers and really, helping others. And that's inundated for women, especially from a young age. What does it mean to be a good girl? Listen, be a good girl. Make sure you take care of everyone else. Put yourself last.
I was always so skinny as a kid, and I was told, you better get some meat on your bones if you want a nice Greek boy to marry you.
Exactly.
Right.
So like who you are now is not enough. Let's really modify who you are so that you are seen as worthy from the opposite sex.
And like my whole purpose is to get married and have babies, right? Like, and
Precisely.
It was said not like it was in a loving, I have a wonderful family, but it's just like that's a normal thing for somebody.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it happens everywhere. And we're not, critiquing, generations before us. It was just, part of the languaging and the expectation. And now with this viewpoint on legacy, it's like, okay, well, what does my life represent to me? I really have this one opportunity to live a precious life where I can set my soul on fire and really live fully. And what does that even mean? Who am I when no one is watching? And when I give myself permission to lose the label of the good girl or the overachiever or the person who you go to solve all the things and fix. And I was like, wow, I don't even know. I don't even know who that person is because I'm so focused on making sure everyone around me is happy that I've lost sight of what I want. And, in the spa industry, I find specifically like the whole industry from my perspective is geared around like making sure people feel seen and celebrated and loved and that they feel good in their own skin. And the whole purpose for me is getting back to, okay, as a nurturer, the whole purpose for us as CEOs, as we're building teams and going after those targets is, well, what is nurturing to you first? And not in a fluffy way, like in a concrete way. Like if you're at the end of your life, looking back, saying, what were the revolutionary moments that made my soul come alive? And what did I do that made a difference? Can you feel in integrity with that? And there was moments that I felt like I couldn't. I was so set on pleasing other people. I was bringing on team members on my own team and then feeling like I needed to put their values above mine. And it's not about, high elbows and taking people out. It's like, what is for my good and how does that honor the collective good? And that's where richness comes in for me is really saying at the end of your life, did I build this company in a way that really enriched my life? And also enrich the lives of others. But if we're only looking externally, we're missing the entire point. Because I've had the beauty of interviewing thousands of people now in their money stories. And I've never heard them say, I wish I worked more. It was always about the revolutionary moments of their life. And many of them were connected to their business, how proud they were to support other women in their businesses, et cetera. But ultimately, that's what I want to come back to every single day. Am I living in integrity with who I want to be? Because we lose sight of that with our to-do lists and our action to our goals.
How much, this may or may not have an impact on you, but how much did motherhood change your beliefs around business? Was that a shift for you? And because I feel like some women, they lose themselves in motherhood and some women find themselves in motherhood?
I was the latter. So it really had me understand the parallels of my maternal instincts, how I showed up, the levels of guilt I faced, choosing myself in my business, deciding if I wanted to stay home with my daughter or not, and facing all of the shadows that came with it, rather than just avoiding it, seeing it front on and saying, okay, is it in integrity for me to want to shorten my maternity leave and show up and meet with clients because it lights me up, which makes me a better mom. And so it inspired me to have deeper conversations with what I want in the legacy of my life. And it also made me understand deeper levels of time being my currency, that it's quality moments and not quantity moments, and how my company can inspire my child to see life differently. And I see that all the time. She sees me preparing for events and I'll say, Graylin, would you love to come on stage one day with mom? And she's like, yes, I would love to have clients. It's just, she's only 6 and it's, silly conversations, but I love seeing that piece of her grow and expand and her confidence. And then it inspires me to have a more enriched life and to have better boundaries around my business. When I started the business, I was working all the time. And then when you become a mom, it's like, well, no, there's a finite window when we can get the work done. And then we also have to hire teams and lead differently. And I think who I was as a mom really helped my leadership because it helped me prioritize important moments, prioritize emotional regulation, helping people feel seen and heard and celebrated, but also to not deplete myself, because I don't want to be a complete ball of mess essentially for my child. I want to be energized when she comes home. I want her to remember the quality moments of her life too.
It was such a game changer for me because I used to always say that entrepreneurship is the greatest lesson in personal development, because you are getting to see sides of yourself that you didn't know, and you're put in situations that, how are you going to react? Because everything comes back to you. And then when I became a mom, I was like, well, actually being a mom is the greatest lesson in personal development. But I feel that as we grow in business and in self, it helps you so much to understand exactly what you're talking about is what is that richness revolution for you, because you understand who you are as an individual in such a greater way. And you ask yourself, like you were saying, you ask yourself questions that you maybe didn't even know to ask yourself before.
You never think to ask. And, when we're always incessantly providing for other people, we seldom look to stand in our worthiness, like truly to say, like, I value myself. I value the moments in my life. I value my time. I value the freedom of my mind. And that's really how I view richness, is not just, going on vacation and then being back in work mode. It's like, can I have mindset freedom where I am literally living at peace with my decisions, that I am grateful for my team, that I'm consistently looking at how I can evolve as a human, as a leader, as a CEO, as a mom, and that it's about the moments that I'm not going to jump in and fix, and I'm not going to be on overdrive or be consumed with nurturing everything, because that's part of the lesson in motherhood, is like getting to teach your daughter that, worthiness is a non-negotiable. And so we deserve that for ourselves as well. And so that has been a massive lesson for me in that question of how I completely agree with you. I tend to say having your own business throws all of your wounds in your face, and it's an invitation to rise, to heal them. But then there's also an invitation to stand in the power of saying, yes, my business is about nurturing, and I can still have a heart wide open, but really strong boundaries and honoring the value of myself.
I think that's so important in spa, because boundaries in general, they tend to start out as solo estheticians, and then they grow into building teams. And as a solo esthetician, oftentimes it's like text messaging and DMs and all this stuff. And it's like, there's no time that it is just you. Like, what do you do when it's just you? That doesn't exist for solopreneurs quite often. So we've talked really kind of high level, and I want to wrap this up with, what are some more, like, for women that are like, yeah, this all sounds great. I love this idea, but I still, whether you can admit it or not, have these really serious blocks, beliefs, stories around money in general. It's nice for you. I could never have $1 million business, right? Just not going to happen for me. Where do you start to get rid of those stories? Where do you start to kind of even understand that their stories or beliefs in the first place?
So first of all, for me, is really awakening to awareness around it. We have no idea how we inundate ourselves with negative self-talk around money. If you spend the next 24 hours just having an awareness for how many times you say, I can't afford that, or that's not possible, it's not in the budget, who am I to do that?
Person.
I'm not a numbers person. That's not my zone of genius. And the truth of the matter is we can have an excuse for every story. But if you start to have an awareness for it, you can say, like, who does that belong to within me? Because for the longest time, I really ran a very, very lean business because the story was, I'm a CPA and I have to reach certain numbers targets. But what I didn't understand was that that numbers focus was actually me missing out on the bigger picture, which was all around me to find ways to grow my company. And I'll give a specific example. At every level of business, we really need to be aware of how we're dictating our life based on a set of rules that we live by. And there's many money rules that we have. And so I'll use an example that I've currently just worked through. Part of growing my business has been to provide mastermind for women entrepreneurs who want to break through income ceilings and heal their money story and stand in their power. And part of that has been to provide one-on-one coaching time. And I've just made that an automatic in my life. If you want to join the mastermind, you got one-on-one time. And then I started noticing resistance in my day-to-day around my calendar. And I started really realizing I had no spaciousness. And I was starting to crave it. And so there was an awareness for me was, okay, something doesn't feel quite right. There's a little bit of resistance here. What am I saying around this? And it's not like I'm sitting there talking to myself, like I need to have one-on-one, but there's blocks here. I have no room in my calendar. So then I'm asking myself, well, why is that? And I start realizing that I have attached this belief that in order to sell my mastermind, there needs to be a one-on-one component. And I've ran masterminds for 6 years. The results are phenomenal. I'm very proud of the work, but somehow I made it an automatic that one-on-one time had to be included. And I started looking at the last, several months and realizing I was literally convincing women to not join my mastermind because I wanted spaciousness in my calendar. And so I had realized that, oh my gosh, if I take on more clients, I won't have enough room. And I was coming up against a mental ceiling. So then I started asking myself, well, do they require one-on-one time to get results? Of course not. That's just a mental block that I'd attached to because I hadn't created a mastermind without one-on-one time. And so as soon as I had an awareness around that, asking better questions, I could start to see how that was showing up and blocking my revenue generation. And so I'm like, okay, what could feel good for me to get really energetically behind a mastermind without one-on-one time? What business structure will I have to change in that program? And so I started looking at it and I started looking at my calendar and saying, okay, I'm going to try this. And now it's a non-issue. The mastermind is incredible without one-on-one time. And it's just a small example of a block. And, I'm sure you could give plenty of examples of that in the spa industry where you're like, I can't afford to bring on new people to the team, or there aren't enough hours in the day. But when you start intentionally paying attention to those automatic programming and rules you set for yourself and ask better questions, we find gaps. And that's where practical money work comes in to say, why do I think I need to have 2 part-time people instead of 1 full-time? What's the story there? If I believe I need to have this level of inventory accessible and I'm carrying the costs, why do I believe I need to do that? And if I have this service packaging because it sells easily, but I've grown and evolved as a CEO, does that something I still want to offer? Because is there a better way to package this and create new forms of richness? And so those are small examples of what I mean about like paying attention to how we speak to ourselves and saying, does that feel an integrity to me? Why do I feel resistance here? And then going deeper into the questions. And then realistically, the answers appear if we're willing to see it. But what happens if you don't ask those questions is overwhelm mounts. Mm-hmm. I have thousands of things on my to-do list. I'm crossing off my to-do list. If I wasn't having an awareness to this resistance around my calendar, I would keep selling my mastermind the same way and feel out of integrity. And so that's a tangible example of mindset at its finest. And literally, you can block thousands and thousands of dollars in sales a month by this.
Well, I see that in spa all the time, specifically around hiring, right? My clients are not going to want to go to anybody else. They're, and in spa, we're providing a service, right? So it's like you hire somebody and then they pay for themselves by getting people in there. So it's like, there's this huge block. And I asked on my Instagram stories the other day, like, what's your biggest question around hiring? And the people that had already hired, there were 3 or 4 people that messaged and said, why didn't I do this sooner?
Right. And we haven't walked this before in lots of instances. So there's an unknown piece, and then fear comes up and ego plays a role to say, no, we need to keep it as it is. That feels safe. We're fine. We can manage. But then overwhelm blossoms. Or ceilings. We come up against earning ceilings and we can't understand why we can't break through them. And specific to any industry around hiring, it's like, well, what am I attaching to in this? Mm-hmm. That people can't change providers. Why do I feel like that? Well, is that connected to my own worthiness, or I don't know how to execute this, so I'm using that as a block? And then what can I do to mitigate it? So what can I do when new clients come in and we really sell them on the service of the team and how held they feel, and that the team has their back rather than just this one service provider? And how can that be empowering for everyone in the organization? Rather than just accepting these things as our truth, it's really committing to this growth path as a CEO, saying, I feel blocked in my worthiness here. Okay, let's find some answers rather than feeling like I'm never going to find an answer. Which piece of this makes me feel resistance? Which piece of this makes me feel unclear? And then take action from that place. Hire a mentor, look to solutions to say, is it the cash flow? Okay, can I problem solve the cash flow? Can I switch up my service providers? What can I do? Because that's really this piece where we can get stuck in our pain, is that we aren't open to seeing answers that are all around us. And that's why I really focus on this lack of destination, because when we slow down and start really being present to our day, not just connected to the high emotions of stress, but instead going, there's a solution for every problem here. And when I'm being in a state of richness, I will always find it. And that's, to me, what worthiness is leading yourself through decisions. We do not expect as CEOs that everything is going to be easy. But part of richness and being a leader for yourself and everyone around you is saying, I will always find the answer because I have 1000% the value within me to find it. And if I can't find it, I have the tools to find someone who will. And that's a very different conversation than saying, I'm tired, I don't have enough.
This is just how it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Than just accepting. I love that. So true. And just knowing that you are worthy of more than just working yourself to the bone and being so burnt out and not enjoying the work that you do.
And recognizing that whole good girl philosophy, like it's very basic and sometimes we can feel like it's fluffy, but it will be everywhere in the nurturing elements of the spa business. If you start paying attention to how you are automatically, I have a silly reference, but like if you're wanting to walk over a river, often the nurturers, all of us, will go first and allow people to walk on our back across instead of building a bridge and cheering people over the other side. And it's a silly visual, but it's so true because we can automatically just want to fix or solve, especially if we have an industry driven around people feeling good. Mm-hmm. But the moment we start saying, okay, value has to begin with me, and then I'm more equipped to find solutions, to be in my power, to lead. And the real truth of that is no one can take your power from you but you. You get to decide that you don't feel worthy. And it has to become a choice. Often people say, I don't understand how to feel worthy. And I'll say, you have to decide you matter right now, that you don't have to be, connected to society's expectations of what nurturing is. You get to redefine what that means to you. You get to redefine who you are as a person, the richness you want, the leader you are. And it doesn't have to feel hard. Initially, it might feel hard as we grow new neural pathways to connect to our leadership. But today, right now, you need to decide that you matter and lead from that place and borrow the belief, if you don't feel it, from the people who do, until you walk in the truth of your own power.
It's so good. So good. So, all right. Let me know tell everyone where they can find you, follow you, stay in touch with you, because gosh, I'm like, I knew you guys would love Selina.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, like part of this conversation, we spoke kind of a high level about mindset, but the truth of it is there's 3 core areas of richness revolution, which is owning your financial power, getting clear on the money beliefs that don't serve you, and then putting that with practical money action steps and practical tools, because we can't just live fully in mindset and then execute. We need to really leverage our power in finances as, a foundational work. Then energetics. Part of energetics is looking at our power and saying, how can I expand it? How can I regulate my emotions so that I'm always solution forward instead of being caught in the stuck pattern of the problem, looking to expand our leadership? What does that look like? And then finally, like really finding aligned strategies that work for us. Because so often we're looking outside of ourselves to what's working for everyone else, and then automatically assuming we can try it and test it. And if it doesn't work, that we're worthless. And my viewpoint on that in Richness Revolution is aligned strategies that really connect with your power will have absolute magnetism. they will be felt by the people who need the work. There's no convincing. They will really align to what you're doing. And I actually recently just did a test of this. I did an offering with no information, and I broke every single rule in marketing. I said, look, I'm not going to provide any dates, no context to what it is. And if you feel the call, sign up. And I was amazed at how many people signed up. And it's really from a place of financial power, energetic power, and strategic power. And so that's the premise of the revolution. And I'm so grateful to share some of the pieces with you today. I respect you so much. You're so brilliant. I love your work. And if you want to learn more about what I do, Selina.Gray on Instagram is my IG handle. And then my website is selinagray.com. And if you want to come hang out in my Facebook group, it's the Richness Revolution with Selina Gray. I've shifted my branding. We're moving from the realm of pain and money boss to Richness Revolution. And so we're making sure that people can still find us in that shift. So thank you so much for today. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. And we'll get all those links below this episode. Be sure to check it out. You guys, Selina makes me smile every day. I see her on Instagram, and just the pictures, just the transformation in you, like from a few months ago to now, it's like when I see that coming through, you had that worthy AF picture. I was like, oh my gosh, I know her. I'm like, she's so good and powerful, and she's my friend.
But if you don't mind, I really want to thank you, because you've been a really instrumental piece in that. There's just certain times when powerful women unite, and we shared like 30 minutes of really potent connection, and connection is currency in my world. And I just will never, ever thank you enough for being, heart-led, impeccable integrity, and just a wonderful human being.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, my dear, I love you so much. And for those of you want to keep this conversation going, be sure to join Selina's Facebook group. Also head on over to our Facebook group, Spa Marketing Made Easy, where we keep the conversation going, and we'll catch you on the next episode.